Welcome back to Project Time Management. Time management is about a lot of calculated thought, network diagrams, PDM, precedence diagramming method. Take a look at what I'm going to be solving today. This is a PDM problem, network diagrams, which many people complain about. So we're actually going to take a look at that. ADM, we'll also take a look at some ADM stuff and crashing, fast tracking, leads, lags, slack float, terms like that. So take a look here. We're going to talk about quite a few things. But when you break time management down, there are 6 things here. Plan schedule management, define activities, sequence activities, estimate activity resources, estimate activity durations, develop schedule, and control schedule. So let me point the mouse to where we are right now. I hope you've been able to trace where we are down here. So we're talking about all of this stuff. And time management could be, it looks a little bit intimidating because you actually have 6 processes, not 6, 7 processes. It's the worst of all the knowledge areas, 7 processes, you know, and that is the biggest. I mean, the 4th edition, we had equal 6 process knowledge areas, you know, integration, time, risk. Not anymore. Time trumps everything because we've got plan, schedule, management, then we've got define activity, sequence activities, estimate activity resources, estimate activity durations, develop schedule and control schedule. 7. So there's quite a lot to talk about. So take a look at the ITTO reminder I've got for you. Know your templates and ITTOs. What do I mean by templates? Anywhere you have what could be a possible template, like a stakeholder register, or something that could be a template, maybe a WBS template, whatever the template is, understand what a template is in the context of the PMBOK. When we talk about tools and techniques and inputs and outputs, if any of them could be a template, make sure you understand what that template could look like. You know, we have a book, our templates book, which has got all of these different templates in it. If you are studying the Project Management Essentials book, you will find some templates in the book as well. So templates are very important. How about the WBS being transformed into activities, and those activities ultimately becoming what you see on the screen? Because what you see on the screen is really the progressive transfer of your WBS information into your activity list, from an activity list into a network diagram, which is what you're seeing. When we sequence activities, we come out with a project schedule network diagram, and that's what you're seeing. So the PDM is the most common one, and we talk about that in the PMBOK guide. It's the only one in the PMBOK. ADM, arrow diagramming method, is only mentioned in passing in a chapter that's not even time management. So PDM is very popular, very important to understand. It's a method of constructing a project network diagram used in critical path methodology. Boxes or rectangles are used to represent activities, and arrows are used to represent dependencies, also called activity on node. So ADM and PDM are the same. There are 4 precedence relationships when it comes to PDM. And these precedence relationships we need to know. So let's go through these precedence relationships one by one. We have the finish to start. A must finish before B starts. Then we have the start to start. A starts and then B can start. We have the finish to finish. A finishes and then B can finish. And then we have the start to finish. A must start before B can finish. So let's take a closer look at some of these. There are 4 precedence relationships, like I said. In finish to start, the start of success activity B depends on the completion of A. In finish to finish, the completion of success activity B depends on the completion of A. In start to start, the start of success activity B depends on the start of activity A. And in start to finish, the completion of success activity B depends on the start of predecessor activity A. So finish to start. An example of finish to start is, I cannot start B until I have finished A. The race must finish before the award ceremony. An example of finish to finish, B cannot finish until A has finished. Editing cannot finish until writing has finished. In start to start, B cannot finish until A has finished. For example, level concrete cannot start until pour foundation has started. Talking about start to finish, activity B cannot finish until activity A starts, which means in the case of shifts, activity B guard cannot finish until the A guard starts his shift. We also talk about another topic here in the area of time management, and that is dependency determination. In the world of dependency determination, we have got different dependencies that we need to think about. So we have 4 types of dependencies talked about in the PMBOK. We have got the mandatory dependency. Mandatory dependencies are also known as hard logic. These are due to the nature of work being done. We have discretionary dependencies. These are dependencies that are established based on best practices. We also have external dependencies, dependencies that are external to the project, and we also have internal dependencies, dependencies internal to the project. So all of this information we take into consideration when putting together our network diagrams and our schedules. So this is a big piece of the exam. Quick reminder about 2 terms you need to know, leads and lags. A lead refers to deliberately starting an activity earlier than it needs to. If you take a look at the screen, it says enables the activity start before it is actually required. For example, starting an activity 3 days earlier than required. Lags refers to deliberately delaying a success activity. So here's an example of lead time. We actually don't need to set the table until we're done with dinner, but we're going to put some lead time in there to enable us accelerate a little bit quicker. How about lag time? In the case of lag time, you can see build foundation and attach cap to concrete foundation. You can see some lag time is in there. Lag time is due to the fact that you need to allow concrete to cure. It's not necessarily an activity in itself, the 7 days or whatever the duration is for the curing of concrete. It's really based on what is. It's based on nature, what is. So lag time, lead time, understand the differences. So I'll show you a very elementary example of network diagrams on the screen, and then we'll go into probably some more challenging network diagrams. So here we've got a barbecue that's taking place. We're barbecuing some food. The project team is working on this. And then we've got the various activities with different durations. So if we give these some names, let's call them A, B, C, D, and E. And taking a look here, we can see that activity A is 1 day or 1 hour or 1 minute, however long it is. Let's call it an hour. Activity B is 2 hours. Activity C is 3 hours. Activity D, 2 hours. And activity E, 7 hours. The question is, how long is the critical path? Now, we probably should make these minutes, otherwise people are going to start waiting for us to get done cooking in 8 hours, don't you think? So taking a look at this one for activity A, the question is, what do we do with these numbers? In order to find the critical path, we're going to use what we call the 0 method. 0. So that means activity A, the start date is going to be 0. Now 0 is a theoretical early start that enables us to compute the critical path in a more straightforward fashion than using the 1 method, which starts on day 1. So let me just walk you through the 0 method, and this shouldn't be too difficult to follow. Okay? So we're going to start using the 0 method by putting a 0 at the start of activity A. Okay? So activity A starts on day 0. Now the duration of activity A is 1. There are different legends in network diagrams. In this legend, we've put the duration to the left. In some the network diagrams, you'll have the duration on top. In some examples, like in the PMBOK guide, you'll have the duration. Let me open up the page to tell you what their legend was. The network diagram on page 177, the legend is actually in the middle. So the duration is in the middle of the box. And the box looks a little bit different than ours. But once you understand what exactly is happening, the rest becomes easier, okay? So we've got 0 for the start. And the finish, we're just going to add the duration. So you could say early start plus duration is equal to early finish. So we're going to have a 1 there, okay? We're going to take this 1, and then we're going to put the 1 here in the early start of B. Then we're going to add 2 the duration to come out with 3. Okay? So I'm hoping that by now you've gone through all of that stuff about network diagrams, the definitions for network diagrams, because I'm not explaining that here. I'm only showing you how to solve a network diagram to find the early start, the early finish, the late start, and the late finish by doing a forward pass. We're going to do a backward pass to also find the late start and the late finish. So in the forward pass, we really find the ES and EF. In the backward pass, we find the LS and LF. Okay? So we're going to take the early finish of activity B and put it here in the early start of activity C, which will be a 3. And then we're going to add the duration. We could move ahead and put a 6 in D, but if you take close notice, you'll see that activity D is dependent on activity C and E. So we cannot start D until we're done with C and E, which means I should probably solve for E before moving to D. And then we can make a decision based on what we find. So we're going to take the 1 from A, put the 1 here. We're going to add the duration, which is 7, to give 8. Now we can make up our minds what goes here. We're going to take the largest number because we cannot work on D except both are done. So the larger number takes preeminence. We're going to take the 8, that's the rule of thumb. We're going to take the larger number, the larger EF, and that becomes the ES. So that's an 8. Then we're going to add the duration for D, which is 2, to give 10. So let me move out a little bit. Does that make sense to you? Does that align with what you would have expected in a network diagram? If you do have any questions about this, you do need to let me know. Okay, so if you find this hard to comprehend or understand, always shoot in a message and you'll get help. Also, remember, we've got a lot of videos online. Actually, one that's more complicated than this that you can check online on youtube.com/Praizion. You might want to take a look and see some of those problems that are similar to this. So what we do in the forward pass is we come up with the EF. Now going backwards, we're going to take the EF, which is 10, and that's going to come down and become the LF. We're going to now say LF minus duration gives late start. So 10 minus 2 is going to give us 8 over here. We're going to take that 8, and that 8 will become the late finish and become the late finish here too. So now we've got our late finishes for C and E. We're going to subtract the duration. That's going to give us a 5 for C. That's going to give us a 1 for E. For B, we're going to take the late start of 5. That's going to go in here. And we're going to have a 3 for the late start, 5 for the late finish. So now, how do we complete the network diagram? To complete the network diagram, we have to take the lowest late start value. We take the lowest late start value and put that in the late finish box for A. That's the rule of thumb. Going forward, we took the largest number. The rule of thumb, when we use the 0 method, is going backwards, we take the smallest number. So the smallest number between 3 and 1, late start of 3 for B, late start of 1 for E is 1. So we have a 1 there, and we say 1 minus 1 is 0. And that's our zero method. In the network diagrams, you could be asked questions such as, what is the critical path? You do realize the critical path is the longest path in the network diagram, which shows you the shortest amount of time within which you can complete the project or the schedule. So taking a look here, we can see that our critical path, if we add up the numbers at the top, we could have either ABCD or say AED. If we go ABCD, we have 8 as the path length. But if we go AED, we end up with a 10, which is the longest path. So the longest path in the network diagram, which is our critical path, is AED, which is 1 plus 7 plus 2, which gives 10. Okay? So that's a very easy problem right there. But we need to work on some more difficult ones so that you really understand what network diagrams are all about. So we're going to work on a more challenging one here. The question is, what is the critical path? Find the ES, LS, EF, and LF times for all the tasks. What is the slack for all the tasks? We'll find the total slack. Free float, free slack, all that information we need to find. Just to give you a quick reminder, if you go back to our previous example, if someone said, what is the slack in activity C? To calculate the slack, they're really talking about what we call the total slack. And the total slack would be LF minus EF, which would be 2. If we're talking about the slack in B, it would be total slack in B, 5 minus 3, which would be 2 also. So your slack, if I could put a statement here so you can see this later on, are slack or float is equal to the late start minus early start, or late finish minus early finish. We call that slack or float. And we call this total slack, actually. Total slack or total float. All right, now that's not the only slack we have in project management. You might remember the mention of free slack. Our free slack is different. For our free slack or free float, we're going to calculate that by taking the early start of the successor activity and subtracting the early finish of the predecessor activity. So if someone says, what's the free slack for or between C, B, and C? What is the free slack between B and C? Or they might just say, what is the free slack of B? Which means, how long can we delay B without affecting C? Total slack is, how long can we delay B without affecting the project end date? So there's a difference between the two. Total slack is about how long can you delay an activity without affecting the end date of the project, whereas free slack is how long can you delay an activity without delaying a successor activity. So if you wanted to calculate that for B, what is the free slack or free float between B and C, or for B, it would be 3 ES of C minus EF of B. So the statement would be early start of the successor activity minus the early finish of the predecessor activity. Okay, now this could be a little bit hard at first to digest. You might want to look at it a few times. And then we have one more type of slack or float. We call it project slack. And I'll show you what this looks like in a few minutes. Project slack is equal to customer required due date minus project end date. Okay? So we've talked about total slack, free slack, project slack. I'll show you an example on the whiteboard of another network diagram, actually this one to be precise. So the first thing you want to do is draw out the network diagram. You want to do your forward pass, you want to do your backward pass, and then you want to find the slack and the float, okay? And I've written for you early start of the predecessor minus early finish of the successor is really your free float. As a reminder, your total float or total slack is within one box, but your free float or free slack, you need two boxes, a predecessor and a successor. All right, so why don't we take a quick break before we actually start cracking this question, because it could take quite a while. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about that network diagram.